Hi, everybody. Welcome to week 12. We are really flying along and getting to the end of this course. I am very much looking forward this weekend to starting to look over your papers for your test analysis. Actually can't wait to see what test questions you came up with, so I'm excited about that. This week we are working on communication, the third GCU guiding principle. And of course, communication, verbal, written, social media, visually presenting ourselves, all those different forms of communication are so important when we're dealing with education. And then, how do we communicate with different types of people? Do we communicate differently with patients versus staff we're teaching, versus our coworkers, versus members of administration? I know that when I am communicating with a direct coworker versus someone that I'm teaching, I'm a little more careful with verbiage, grammar, even though I try to speak well most of the time. But I pay more attention to that when I'm teaching versus when I'm just casually doing a conversation. And so I'd be interested to see, does your verbal and or nonverbal communication change, do you think, when you're talking with patients, teaching, coworker, admin? How does that change for you? I know that also things for me that changed when I went into management and administration, things like that, are things like emails. How do I compose emails? How do I double check them? How do I make sure I've got the right tone? In online education, I tried very hard to set a right tone. It doesn't work 100% of the time. Students certainly have misunderstood things that I've said, but it's something I'm really focused on. And then social media. Oh my gosh. How do you work social media in with your work setting? Do you friend coworkers? Do you friend bosses? Have you ever friended a former patient? In my educational roles, what my rule is regarding Facebook and friending is that I will friend and Facebook with a student only after they have graduated. Even if I'm, in the beginning course with them and I won't have them all through their education program, I don't do that until after they've graduated. I actually still communicate with students that I've taught for undergrad who are off in different parts of the country doing absolutely wonderful things within nursing, and it's really rewarding to know that you played a part in their career. But I don't Facebook with anyone who's a current student. That's just my policy. So I'd be interested in what you think about social media and interacting with your work environment and what you think is appropriate and not appropriate. Another area of communication that I just want to talk a bit about this week is interdisciplinary communication. In healthcare, we cannot be silos. We know we need everybody to play their part for our patients to recover or to have a peaceful death or whatever it is the goal that we have for our patients. And so we've got to be able to be part of interdisciplinary communication. This may take a role on the education side. How do I teach my students how to communicate well with other disciplines? How do I get my students to understand other disciplines? How do I get my students to feel comfortable in interdisciplinary projects and to speak up for nursing? How do I get my students to understand that all the disciplines are important, but nursing is the holistic one that tends to hold everything together? It's a little bit of a balancing act, I have to tell you. There are certain areas that I've worked. One is acute rehab. And on one of the acute rehabs where I was the nursing director, it was almost like PTs and OTs felt that they ran the unit. And that nurses were basically bowel bladder and some training, that was nurses' role. I mean, these were nurses who were really dealing with high acuity patients. who came directly from acute rehab with large TBIs, massive strokes. We were doing respiratory rehab, people on vents. But there was this real misperception about the roles of the disciplines that I needed to address. And so, how do we get those things across to our students, to our staff nurses, things like that? It's a really interesting area to think about. And then also, as part of accreditation standards in nursing education, are that you have some components of your program that address interdisciplinary collaboration. So it's a requirement. It's not just something that's good to know. Anyway, so I'm going to touch an article that has a little bit of information about interdisciplinary collaboration. All right, I think that's about it for this week. Oh, we are going to be moving towards your portfolio, and I'll be talking more about it. But in your portfolio, there is a section where you're going to be talking about the competencies that we discussed in our DQs. You cannot cut and paste your DQ initial response into your portfolio, because if you read the portfolio, you need to talk about your achievements in that section, and that might be as part of your education, as part of your work experience, anything. It's a slightly different spin. So I just want to make sure everybody knew that ahead of time. You can't just cut and paste from your initial DQ response about a competency and put it into your portfolio. You can use some of those same thoughts, most definitely, and maybe even a reference would be appropriate, but it's going to be different verbiage, okay? And I do encourage you to be looking at that assignment. I think I may have mentioned before that there's some references that you have to obtain. You need to provide me with contact information for 3 references, one from education setting, one from work setting, and one from personal. And then you need 2 reference letters. And those reference letters don't have to be from one of the 3 written reference lists, essentially, that you give to me. They can be from anyone. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. Again, the whole idea of the portfolio is to try to give you kind of a practice run of something that you might put together as if you were applying for a nurse educator position. All right. See you in the main form.